What follows is a discussion on vision. What does it mean to see something? What happens when there is vision? For example, when we say that we see the world, something, anything. In the upper section of this sheet that we have here, we have charts. The upper section indicates what has become the dominant view, a view that is expounded in textbooks throughout the world, throughout the modern world, a world influenced most notably in this case by two thinkers whose names appear in blue: Descartes, a Frenchman, and Kant, Immanuel Kant, and René Descartes. Now, according to these thinkers, what we have when we see something, or when we say that we see something, is a brain, the eye, which is connected to the brain, and, as we can see here, a world of phenomena that is right in front of our eye, a world made of determinate objects, objects that can be measured, that are situated in such a way that we may determine their place by relating them to other determinate objects. Now, how does this happen that we see, that the eye sees? Well, the eye receives these phenomena from the external world. It brings these the data that it receives from the external world into the brain. The brain is supposed to process the data and somehow produce the consciousness of these phenomena. Now, very often in textbooks we don't go further. We might, however, open up as a parenthesis the question, well, how does all of this come into place? How is it that the brain and the eye respond to the external phenomenal world? Why is it that we see anything in the first place? Why don't we just take in external phenomena, movement, light, and simply accept it without producing a consciousness of these phenomena? And this chart indicates, in fact, that behind this activity of the brain and eye, whether we state this explicitly or not, in Kant's case, this becomes more explicit than elsewhere, and certainly than in our mechanically produced textbooks. There is something that we may call a force, or the movement of matter, a general one, an undetermined one, something that is of a cosmic order. And we find this in Descartes in a subtle manner. He helps us see what he understands to be the background of our vision, the background that is not intelligible, that, however, drives the brain into movement. And the brain here functions as a machine. This is crucial to the understanding of modernity as a whole. And here on the right-hand side of the upper section of this sheet, we see another chart, a chart of a television. Now, there's a cathode ray tube that mediates two aspects of this television: a screen on the right-hand side, which produces the phenomena. At any rate, the screen is the place where the phenomena appear. On the left-hand side, we have the indication machine. That is the source of the image. Through the tube, the image appears. Now, the tube takes the place of the eye on the left-hand side of the sheet. On the upper level, we have seen already that there's a brain on the left-hand side, there's an eye in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, there is this screen, as it were, of phenomena, the world that we see at any given moment. Now, that world is replicated by the television screen, whereas the brain is the machine. The brain, anyway, is understood by Descartes, Kant, and others, all modernist thinkers insofar as they are modern, as a machine. The brain functions mechanically, not moved by an intellect, a mind, an end, an idea that is transcendent to it, that precedes it. The ends are not given by nature, ends are produced. Now, in the center of the page, we have an alternative that is dominant in the writings of pre-modern times, most notably in ancient times. This view that is explicated here in the chart is referred to as Platonism, in quotes. What we have here is not simply the eye and the brain connected mechanically, but the human being as a whole. And this human being is placed between two things. On the one hand, the world of determinations, which is placed here on the right. On the other hand, on the left, the world of infinity or of indetermination. There are no determinations there. There is, however, a nous, the Greek word for, shall we say, mind, and other terms here written in Chinese or Japanese that indicate the indeterminate mind, or a mind that is not somewhere, but that contains space and time, that is unlimited. At once, the core of the mind, as it were, the center of the center of the center of the mind, namely the absolute mind. So we have mind with its contents, its undetermined contents, on the one hand. Here on the left, in the middle, there's the human being as a whole, and on the right-hand side, there's a world of determinations. Now, these determinations are met at first, we might say, as physical, external to us, but gradually, through the exercise of vision, of our living as mediating what is determined and what is the background of all determination, namely the undetermined or infinity, we come to understand the world of appearances as a world that is with us, as a world of the imagination, a poetic world of things that are made, that are not simply given, but that appear through our mediation. Thus, a world that is, in some important sense, with us, that we are, in fact. And so, what we might say here is that we are facing a mirror of what is the background of this world, and that this mirror is our world, the world that we are, a world that comes into being through our mediation, and that ultimately is the result of our presence. Now, underneath, underlined in blue, we read phenomena are essentially the contents of mind, or the world of ideas. The expression here brings us back to Plato. What we have here is the phenomenal world being understood ultimately as a poetic world that is projected out of the mind, a mind that is not determined, a mind that is certainly not a brain, that is not here or there, but that precedes ontologically and epistemically the brain. Well, this world of phenomena then is projected out of a world of essences, a world of things themselves. These are the contents of the mind. Outside of the mind, we have a world of fictions. At first, these fictions are sensed as being outside of the mind, and finally, by the philosopher, they are understood to be mental entities, and thus things that belong to the mind. To what mind is a question, certainly only to a very slight extent to our minds, to the extent that our minds are determined, that they are between infinity, a background of vision, and the determined world that is in front of us, as it were, that which we see, that which we are aware of at any given moment, and that can be measured, quantified. Now, on the bottom of the sheet, we have a term highlighted, Christianity. What we have here is an understanding of vision that depends in part upon the classical teaching, the Platonic teaching. What we have is God. This God replaces the anonymous, indeterminate mind, the mind of ideas. This God creates a world, which in turn is the cradle of man. This man looks back upon the world to discover God as its creator. On the lower level, we have a slightly different exposition of the same point, God creating man. or driving man to the world so that the world may be delivered back unto God. What we have seen here are then three distinct understandings of what it means to see. A mechanical understanding that presupposes an unintelligible background, a background that, as Kant puts it, cannot be understood at all. It is a noumenal background, a background of things themselves, as it were, as Kant puts it. But why can it not be known? What prevents us from knowing it? Well, simply put, it is unintelligible. It constitutes the total movement of passions, of matter, however we may wish to call it, of something, in any case, that is not ultimately or seriously transcendent with respect to phenomena. Something that enters into determination through the brain, so that the phenomenal world is not ultimate, and yet it is the world into which the indeterminate world enters. It is a world that we see and that is as real as the indeterminate, to the extent that movement, infinite movement, can enter into certain domains. Now, turning to the center of the page, we have seen what we have called the Platonic understanding of vision, where the physiological structure of the brain and the eye is not considered in any detail properly, because man as a whole occupies this mediation role between the world of phenomena, the world of determinations, and the infinite world. Why should this be important? This shift between man as a whole and this apparatus, this machine, brain, eye, perhaps even ear in other respects, properly, because the human being is not at all understood, conceived as a machine. He is, if anything, a poetic entity between the infinite and the finite. He is a key, even, to the understanding of infinity, but also to a proper understanding of the world of determinations, of what we see, whether it is ready at hand or envisioned as situated on the other side of the sky. Finally, we saw on the bottom of the page an understanding that we have referred to as Christian, where the mind of classical philosophy, the indeterminate mind, the unfettered mind, the jewel of the mind, is now personified, and it wills primarily. This will, this divine will, drives man into the world to transform the world into a mirror of God, to call the world back to God through the transformation, of course, of the raw material of the world. The crucial difference between this view and the modern view, of course, is that what precedes the brain is not sheer force. It is assumed to be intelligent, meaningful. It is not knowable, but we are supposed to believe that it knows. And so our life, projected into the phenomenal world, becomes altogether meaningful. We believe that it is. We do not know it, of course. This is one reason why the philosopher, as philosopher, cannot be a Christian, namely, that he cannot accept that the world is meaningful simply on the basis of a belief. He would rather question the proposition that the world of phenomena is meaningful, rather than accepting that it is simply as a matter of belief regarding, in other words, the world of determinations, the world of phenomena, as if it were meaningful. Now, this as if reappears in modernity. It reappears most notably, most blatantly with Kant. The world of phenomena is an as if. We look at things as if they were real. We look at ends, projected ends, as if they were attainable, as if they were natural. We take them for granted, and they are important as guiding elements, as stars that may be used to organize our lives, to walk in a certain direction without feeling lost, but that are ultimately, upon reflection, to be understood as illusions, in fact, as fabrications of a machine. Now, the fact that this machine fabricates them is dependent upon forces that are beyond our understanding, and Kant accepts them. He may even speak of all of that precedes the machine as sublime, as something that deserves awe, and therefore a response that is almost religious. We might call it spiritual, and certainly a fascination that no distinct phenomenon may warrant. A final remark on modernity's reading of vision. In opening our discussion, we referred to the phenomenal world as received by the eye, or by the brain through the eye. Later, however, we suggested that the phenomenal world is made. Kant conceives of cognitive structures allowing any and all particular vision to take place. The phenomenal as such would be necessarily shaped by our mental structures. So while the phenomenal is supposed to be given to us, it enters the arena of our consciousness through general conceptual structures. As noumenal, the phenomenal in itself is outside of our structures, whereas the phenomenal for us is always determined through our structures. It is possible to bridge the gap between the two formulations, then, that phenomena are given to us, on the one hand, and that we make them, or that they take shape through the structures given by our minds. We may bridge the gap by saying that the phenomena that we receive are in themselves none other than the noumenal, which in the drawing on the upper left side of the sheet appears on the left of the brain. The eye receives the phenomena, renders them to the brain processes them, orders them, structures them according to its own or transcendental, in Kant's terms, structures. It conceives of them. The consciousness of these phenomena emerges. We now have established distinction between the phenomena and the noumenal, that which they are in themselves. And that is why in the drawing we have phenomena being received as opposed to the noumenal, the things themselves, the infinite being received. That is simply because we tend to imagine that which we receive, that which the eye receives, as standing in front of it, rather than as its background. To speak simplistically, we have the sense that there are more details to the image that we have before our eyes than we can say, than we can fathom. So what we have in vision is a reception by the eye of an infinity of details that are processed as if they were a huge wave flooding our brain, and the brain would then try to sort them out and select, structure the relevant details that are relevant to its own needs, into discrete, manageable forms, so that then we would have a consciousness of what has been seen, a consciousness that then can be remodeled as we continue examining what is before us. So, on a common pedestrian understanding of vision in the modern context, the infinite, the noumenal as well, is before us as a phenomenal world. It is simply that this phenomenal world needs to be translated by the brain through the eye into manageable portions.